Good morning. Welcome to Unity Longmont Spiritual Center on the 26th of March, 2023. And we are blessed to have Dannah Edwards as our speaker today and Christina Hildebrandt with her harp Hester to provide music. So we will start with music, please. Thank you, Christina. It's at this time that we go into prayer by taking a breath together. Beloved presence, everywhere present, we join today to celebrate life, to celebrate being human and spiritual. We celebrate having the courage to love, the courage to open our hearts to other humans, to animals, to our world, and to ourselves. And with that open heart, we have an awareness of how everything is connected so deeply and includes ourselves. And as always, we say thank you. And so it is. And we will hear from Christina again.
Vi säger lullaby. hänger i vår björk. Runt omkring står natten mörk. Då ska barnet sova.
Thank you, Christina. Your music, your voice make our hearts sing. Thank you. So at this time, let us open our hearts and our mind for Dannah Edwards. Welcome, Dannah. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Speaking of animals, I have one scratching at the door. So. Sorry about that. So anyway, I have known about St. Francis since I was a child, and I've always loved him. And I think he's one of the most compelling and fascinating figures that we have as human beings. He has been beloved and venerated for over 800 years now. And what's interesting is not just the length of that, but it's the breadth of people who love him. I mean, you have the most conservative Catholics, you have more broad-minded Catholics like Franciscan Friar Richard Rohr. You have New Age spiritual teachers like Eckhart Tolle. You have environmentalists. You have lovers of animals. All of these people claim St. Francis and love him dearly. And I don't know of any other figure that appeals to all of these groups. And I think there are many reasons for that. And I guess some will kind of look at here today. He was one of the first people to really talk about how the earth herself is holy. And when we do the meditation, we're going to hear his Canticle of the Creatures, which he dictated when he was blind and not far away from death. And it is said to be the first poem or song in the vernacular, not in Latin. So another first. He also had a great sensitivity to animals, a great respect for animals. He called them brothers and sisters. He is famous for his sermon to the birds, and it is said that birds would follow him. He was a mendicant and an itinerant preacher, so he would travel and preach in the vernacular, mostly to the most poor. And it is said that at times he would turn and he would preach to the birds, and they would listen rapt to him, and that they would follow him, and they would sit on his shoulders and perch on his arms while he was preaching as well. And I have one quote from his biographer. No, thank you, as Saint Bonaventure. And this is a quote about right after Saint Francis died. He said that there was a gathering of larks that appeared. They came in a great flock over the roof of the house, and whirling around for a long time with unusual joy, gave clear and evident testimony of the glory of the saint, who so often invited them to praise God. So I think even people that don't know anything about saints in general associate Saint Francis with the bird bath, and so we can see the roots of this. Francis is also known for taming the wolf of Gubbio, a town in Umbria near Assisi, where he was from. Thank you. So this wolf apparently was terrorizing the town and eating the people, and you can see some human remains over there to the left. And Francis came with a group of followers to help the townspeople, and everyone was frightened and ran away, and the wolf was charging right for St. Francis. And Francis held up his hand and made the sign of the cross, and the wolf bowed down. And after that, he made a deal. He asked the people of Gubbio to respect their brother, the wolf. He was hungry, and to feed him. And with the wolf, since they were taking care of you and feeding you, then don't eat them anymore. And it worked out. And he was beloved and venerated and kept kind of like the communal pet of the townspeople until he died. And there was actually a skeleton found, and there's a chapel to this wolf in Gubbio that you can go to. But I think, we talked earlier about how many of you have lost a dear pet, and I have too. And I think that Francis really saw how animals can teach us humility and gentleness and really complete acceptance. I mean, in my experience, no human has ever loved me as much as my dogs have loved me, with such complete acceptance and understanding. We as human beings can only go so far, and I think animals are often angels here to teach us how to love better. They really are role models for us. And so anyway, I think I was happy that St. Francis was the topic today, and I really would like to remember with all of you the pets who have loved you and taught you and who have been your angels and who still are. And I have my lovely Grace. She's named Grace, Gracie, and she is she does teach me so much every day, and I am really grateful for her. And I feel like she transforms my heart every day. And probably many of you feel the same way about your pets. So I didn't know this, but I looked it up. Guess how many Catholic saints there are? Over 10,000. So you think of that, like of these 10,000, how many does your average person know of? And there's the easy ones of the people who are around Jesus or in the New Testament, like the apostles and Mary Magdalene. But those people aside, how many saints do you know of? And so if you're Irish, you say St. Patty, right? But other than that, it's overwhelmingly St. Francis. Everybody knows St. Francis. There's something about him. And even if it's really vague, they associate him with gentleness and kindness to animals. So, he lived 800 years ago, and he's still very much a part of our cultural fabric. He's still a household name. There's a lot of cultural layering that's happened in this 800 years. And then there's also my own personal cultural layering that has happened over the decades of my life. I have always loved Francis in very different ways as my own spiritual journey took very different turns. As a child, I went to school in a convent. I was introduced to him there. I converted to Catholicism at 18. That didn't really take for me, and I started a spiritual journey that veered away from that. He actually was my patron saint when I converted. And then as I progressed in my spiritual journey and more towards Buddhism, I came to see Francis as a bodhisattva and as a Buddha. He has fit every single, I guess, what would you say, the different stages. He's fit with every single stage, no matter how wildly different they've been. And the title of the talk, A Holy Fool, comes from a quote by St. Francis. He was said to be speaking to a cardinal who was trying to quote all of this church law to him, and he said, please don't talk to me about that. The Lord has told me he wanted to make a new fool of me. And so what exactly does that mean? And for us today too, and is that perhaps one of the reasons why we still all love him so much? So I'm just going to give you some facts about his life. There's some really surprising things I didn't know. Okay, so he was born in Assisi in the region of Umbria, which is central to Italy. It's like the heart of Italy. It's right beside Tuscany. In 1181, he died at the age of 44. And in that short life, and most of the time during his life, he had what was thought to be malaria. They mentioned fevers. And then he fasted, he lived in huts, he exposed himself to the elements. So he was often ill, and then he picked up some kind of eye disease when he went on the crusade that he went on, and was either partially or mostly blind for the last few years of his life. But despite all of that, he met with popes. He founded multiple religious orders, the Franciscan friars, of course, and our current pope, who took the name of Francis, is a member of that order. And he founded also the Poor Clares, which you've heard of St. Clare of Assisi. She was a young noble woman who was inspired by St. Francis. And he founded that order for her. So women could also live according to the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Now, there had been vows of poverty among monastics before St. Francis, but it meant no private property. It meant common property for the convent. So there were some convents or, abbeys that were actually quite wealthy. But since nothing was owned privately, they took that as a sign that they were living according to the vow of poverty. For Francis, it meant nothing. He was as radical as Jesus was in his Sermon on the Mount, the turn the other cheek, give away your cloak, own nothing. And he said that his friars, according to his rule of poverty, they would offer to work for their daily bread. And if that wasn't possible, they would beg for it. So that's why it's called a mendicant order. And then he actually went on a crusade to the Holy Land. He went to Jerusalem and he went to Egypt, and he met with the Sultan of Egypt at great peril to his life. He was not able to stop the bloodshed as he hoped. He was not able to convert the Sultan as he hoped, but the Sultan was so impressed by him that he said, you and your order can come back and set up shop in my country, but none of the others. and that's the truth. And so for many years, the Franciscans were the only ones who were allowed there. Francis is the saint we have to thank for Christmas. He valued the incarnation of God as a humble baby in a manger as the main message, not the resurrection. He saw God being in all of nature, and that was the great gift that God gave us by becoming incarnate on this planet. And this is where we find God. And so he actually staged a manger scene. He asked people, so some people had a baby there, and he, in a humble grotto in this little town of Greccio in 1223, he staged the very first living manger scene. And starting from that tradition, we started to celebrate Christmas in that way. And in Italy still, people set up a huge manger scene. The Christmas trees didn't start there until like late 60s. That's really the Christmas tradition, and it still is for a lot of people. So his childhood and youth was pretty conventional for a fortunate rich guy at the time. His father was a very successful cloth merchant and who traveled to France a lot. And his mother was said to be French. And they actually named him Francesco, which means French. And he grew up wealthy, happy, and reading a lot of the troubadour sagas about knights. And so he had this dream of being a knight and having a military career. And so when he was about 20, the town of Perugia, they were always skirmishing between city states then, went to war with Assisi, and he was all ready to go. And he was made captive and was kept in a cell for over a year before someone paid the ransom. And they think during that time he contracted malaria. So the rest of his life he had fevers. And but anyway, he came back, and he was known as the king of revels by his friends. He loved parties and hijinks, and he was a extremely charismatic and popular guy. And so still, when he was 20, he was dreaming of being a knight, and there was this crusade by this wealth noble against a Ghibelline, and he signed up and started writing off for that. And he had this series of dreams in which he was told that he needed to return to Assisi and not continue. And let's see. In one of these dreams, he saw all of this armor, but the armor was bearing crosses. And then a voice said to him, "Why do you burden yourself seeking the servant instead of the master?" So he's starting to get indications that his life would take another turn. And so he came back, and he started spending more and more time in silent contemplation and riding around the countryside by himself. And one day he was riding along, and he encountered a leper. And at the time, if you developed leprosy, you were made to live outside the city in an isolated community, and you actually had to like ring a bell or whatever so that people would know to get away from you. And it was sad. I mean, there's a lot of necrosis with leprosy, so there's actually a really strong odor that people had, had the disease. And so he's riding along, and he sees this leper, and his whole life he had found them disgusting and repulsive. This is in his own words. And then for some reason, he got off his horse, he embraced the leper, and he kissed him on the lips. And after that, he started living in a hut. He started giving away a lot of his fine clothes, dressing like the poorest of the poor, and he started ministering to lepers. So when you think of it at the time, that was kind of like the kiss of death. For some reason, he never contracted leprosy that we know of, but he did help lepers for the rest of his life. And then there's another story. So one day he's praying in this church that's in ruin. It's all kind of, no roof is left on it. And it's called the Church of San Damiano. And the crucifix speaks to him and says, "Francis, go repair my church, which you can see is in ruin." So Francis took that pretty literally, and he stole some cloth and a horse from his father to pay for these repairs. So the father was not happy with Francis at all by this time. And he called Francis before the whole city and before the bishop in this trial, telling Francis to return what he had stolen and also to renounce his inheritance. And Francis said, "Fine, I get here, have everything back, and here, have these too." And he stripped naked in front of everyone. Again, here's someone who's being a fool for God. And so here in this painting, you can see that the bishop covers him up with his cloak, and that's one for modesty, but B also to signify that the church has now claimed him. The church has now decided that he is one of theirs. And so he started dressing in the roughest of peasant robes, and they think they still have the robe that he wore, and it doesn't look nice. It's just like one patch after another. And so now that's kind of, we're used to seeing that brown robe with the robe as, okay, that's a Franciscan habit. But at the time, it was just the cheapest thing you could wear. And so that's what they adopted. And let's see. But in 1209, by then he's got like 11 men who are following him, and they're all dressing, either they have nothing, they're living in shacks, they're wearing the robe, no shoes. But he decides to go to Rome, which is like a 2-hour drive, so it was quite a journey at the time, to go before the Pope. At the time it was Innocent III, who was in the midst of conducting the Cathar Crusade and killing off all these other ascetics. So I think Francis wasn't stupid. He goes, our order looks very much like the Cathars. We do not want the Pope to burn us at the stake. So he went before the Pope, and the Pope did approve of his order, even though they were smelly and had no shoes on, and people thought they were kind of weird. And he was just like 20-something at the time, 9 straggly followers. So that was the beginning of the Franciscans. And let's see. And then in 1219, he went on the 5th Crusade, and not as he would have dreamed when he was young as this sword-wielding knight, but as a poor friar. And he went to try to end the bloodshed, and then met with the Sultan, and as we said earlier, at great peril to his life, but he survived that too. And let's see. Then in 1224, he was praying on Mount Laverna, and he had a vision of a seraph, which is a 6-winged angel, and often these wings are on fire. I believe we have a visual of this one too. And so he's watching this seraph descend from heaven, and at one point the wings open up, and there's the crucified Christ inside. And after the vision of Christ disappeared, Francis found that he had a mirroring of the wounds of the crucified Christ on his own body, the hands and feet, and then the cut in the side. So Francis is also the first saint to receive the stigmata. There were many after. And then I just have a little anecdote of when he died. He died a couple years later. He was surrounded by his brothers, and he was in one of these huts that they lived on a dirt floor. And he asked them, "Lay me naked on the ground and let me lie there after I'm dead for the length of time it takes to walk 1 mile unhurriedly." So that's what they did. He died naked on Mother Earth, and a lot of scholars have seen this as a sign that he believed that both the body and the earth, through the incarnation of Christ, had become profoundly good. And he died as humbly as he could possibly die. And he's the most Christ-like of any saint. And the church, which was, of course, all about political and economic power also at the time, loved Francis for a lot of reasons, because it was the real thing. And immediately he was canonized. He was canonized within 2 years, and they started building this big basilica in his honor, which he never would have approved of, by the way. He would have not been happy about this huge church at all. And there's this beautiful series of frescoes that were made by Cimabue and Giotto and their school, depicting all these scenes of Francis's life. And the popes painted themselves into quite a few of them, like treating him with all honor and dreaming that he's holding up the church. And so, yeah, we kind of have to wonder about that. But what do we know about his life, and how do we know it? The very first biography was written by Thomas of Celano, and he was commissioned by Pope Gregory IX, and it was completed just 4 years after Francis died. So we think that a lot of this is probably pretty accurate. And then there's a book that came out 150 years later called The Little Flowers of St. Francis that you might have heard of. And that's where a lot of the legends like the birds and the wolf of Gubbio come from. And if you're interested, you can look up his actual writings that still exist. And there's a number of letters and the rules that he wrote for his hermitage. And then he wrote this thing called the 28 Admonitions. And so there's just one short one that I wanted to read to you, because I think it's very much about being in the present moment and about guarding your mind. Our mind is a garden, and weeds are going to grow there unless we really tend to the soil, water it, and grow the right seeds. So I'll just read this quickly. Where there is charity and wisdom, there is neither fear nor ignorance. Where there is patience and humility, there is neither anger nor disturbance. Where there is poverty with joy, there is neither covetousness nor avarice. Where there is inner peace and meditation, there is neither anxiousness nor dissipation. Where there is fear of the Lord to guard the house, there the enemy cannot gain entry. Where there is mercy and discernment, there is neither excess nor hardness of heart. And so that's one of those beautiful things that I think I want to read every day until I die. There's a really beautiful prayer that many of you have probably heard, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. And so I just learned he actually didn't write that. That was written in 1912 during World War II by a French cleric. It's quite beautiful though. And I think that he very much understood the spirit of St. Francis, and it's a true gift that he gave to us. And our one of the true gifts of St. Francis is our beloved Father Richard Rohr. And I have, I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but there's a few slides. We are, okay, that we look at together. And I'm sure a lot of you are great fans. And he's written over 30 books, and several of them are specifically about St. Francis. So here's a lovely quote about his all-night prayer. Apparently, Francis was invited to spend the night by someone in Assisi who spied on him and saw him kneeling all night long, saying this prayer: "Who are you, O God, and who am I?" So that's one that we have. And I think there was one other one. Oh, who can read it? Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So Pope Francis insists that mercy is at the very top of the Christian hierarchy of great truths, and that everything falls apart whenever mercy is displaced by anything else. I think he's right. And I think anyone who knows of St. Francis, however vaguely or however well, associates him with just that, with mercy. And also for veneration of the physical world, the body, nature, animals, and for seeing God in all those things. So then for the meditation, we had the Canticle of the Creatures, if I'd like to do that. So Most High, all-powerful, good Lord, yours are the praises, the glory, and the honor, and all blessing. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no human is worthy to mention your name. Praised be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially Sir Brother Sun, who is the day and through whom you give us light. And he is beautiful and radiant with great splendor, and bears a likeness of you, Most High One. Praise be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon and the stars. In heaven you formed them clear and precious and beautiful. Praise be you, my Lord, through Brother Wind, and through the air, cloudy and serene, and every kind of weather, through whom you give sustenance to your creatures. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Water, who is very useful and humble and precious and chaste. Praised be you, my Lord, through Brother Fire, through whom you light the night, and he is beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praised be you, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, and who produces various fruit with colored flowers and herbs. Praise be you, my Lord, through those who give pardon for your love and bear infirmity and tribulation. Blessed are those who endure in peace, for by you, Most High, shall they be crowned. Praised be you, my Lord, through our sister bodily death, from whom no one living can escape. Woe to those who die in mortal sin. Blessed are those whom death will find in your most holy will, for the second death shall do them no harm. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks, and serve him with great humility.
Thank you, Dannah. So, with open hearts and minds opened by St. Francis and Dannah, let us hear from Christina. Thank you, Christina. There are no words to
That was my
express.
bird song.
Perfect, thank you. It's at this time that we go into our donation of love and light. And we do that again by taking a breath, being fully in our bodies, aware of our humanness and our sacredness, aware of the love and the light within us, the love and the light that we are. And by simply being aware, this love and this light expand beyond us to be shared. There is a holy alchemical process here. Just by allowing this love and light, the world can be changed and improved to greater good. It is a reminder that each of us has a place here on this earth. We have a home here in this light and in this love. And so it is. We will hear from Christina.